Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Hello everyone, and welcome to Secrets of Saturn. On this episode, we have Jonas Favela. Jonas Favela is the administrator for the StopTheCrime.net Facebook page and has been on a 5-year-long journey of truth-seeking that he intends to span the rest of his life. Jonas, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this is your first interview you've ever done, even though you've been doing the activist kind of work with your StopTheCrime.net page.
Right.
Let's talk about who you are, where you came from, what woke you up to all these things going on in the world.
Well, it started 2011. I was just like everyone else. I had a good job, and I kind of revolved my whole identity about, how much money I made and what car I drive, the whole nonsense of what our society puts on as what you should be. And when I lost it all, I felt pretty empty. But then I started finding it gave me some time to research different information. And I came across, it started really with food and finding out what a GMO was. Never heard of it before. Never heard of a Monsanto. I mean, who are these people? And that's really where it started for me. I went from there to the Federal Reserve System, fiat currency, the whole paradigm that I've been told through school and my whole life was a lie. And so it led me down this path of truth seeking. And there were some false starts because, I didn't really know. I think when you first come across this information, so you're bombarded by all the different types of things. And it took some while to differentiate what's actually truthful and what's disinformation, because there is a lot of disinformation out there.
There's just a lot of information in general out there, and you kind of have to put the pieces together on your own, take different threads, and kind of weave your own web of what you perceive as to be truth and reality. Right.
And so one of the things that really started me going was I loved history. I read books, watched the History Channel, and I thought that this was the truth. And then I come to find out that no, it's not. They're definitely putting a spin on things. And so I started researching education, and I found people like John Taylor Gatto and Charlotte Iserby, and then I found Tragedy and Hope, and that just blew my mind. Realizing that the educational system, and this is what most people in this country suffer from, is they don't know how to critically think. It's been taken out of it used to be in there. They used to do grammar, logic, rhetoric, the trivium. That used to be part of the classical education, but it was systematically cut out.
Yeah, so I would also postulate that the current academics federally mandated for schools, known as Common Core, really, really nail that coffin shut.
Yes, that is I think the last thing that they need. And I have a daughter, 16. I've seen what they're doing in Common Core, and it's really scary. When I was reading some of her, like, when she was in 7th grade, they were doing American history, that was a joke. So I was like, okay, well, let's look at what do they say about banking here. So I'm just curious. I knew there wouldn't be much. Well, they did a little blurb on the Federal Reserve, and it was like literally a paragraph, and it read like a brochure.
What I've never seen that. So what did it actually say?
It was a brochure just saying that that was set up to stop
inflation and all that.
Inflation and depressions and to stabilize the monetary system, which it absolutely did not do. And so that. Yeah, it was a blurb. It was propaganda, and then I explained to her what it is. This is a private corporation that rules everything. The monetary system, I believe, the financial system is the head of the snake as far as like dealing with day-to-day things here, and it has impoverished this country and the people and people around the world. And it goes back. I told her about Jekyll Island. Oh, you had all these billionaires setting up this system. This isn't something. Then later on, I come to find out that the system that they supposedly created really is an ancient one, going back to Babylon, like the Babylonian woe. I don't know if you've ever read any of that stuff or seen those videos. So this is an ancient thing, and it's an ancient system of control. And I know that we as people, as Americans, are told we're free, but we're not at all, period.
It's an illusion of freedom, I would say.
Yeah.
I call it the veneer of society.
Yes, the veneer of society. And that's what I was stuck in before I started doing the research and learning, was that veneer of society, like most people are.
Now, well, let's go back to what was the thing that actually was the trigger for you? Obviously, you were living the typical American lifestyle, trying to get ahead, doing the rat race.
Yeah.
And what was the first thing? What was the thing that made you raise your eyebrow and go, what's up with this?
Well, I started watching these because I was really into nutrition. And I started watching these documentaries like Forks Over Knives and Ingredients, and just finding out that our food supply is so toxic. And then, like, I never heard of Monsanto. So I'm like, well, what's this? And then, oh man, that got really interesting. And I'm like, well, how is this happening? Where's the FDA and all this? And then you come to find out that the FDA is in the pocket of these people. They're not there to protect us. And this also goes into another thing that I never even heard of, was the depopulation agenda.
Eugenics.
Eugenics, yeah. Eugenics. I've never heard of that. Never taught in school and college about that. And that scared me to death. And it still bothers me because I can see it all around.
Once you know, you can see what they're doing, because they're hitting us on numerous fronts. Right.
Yeah. It's basically the way I kind of preface it is that we're at war on all fronts. It's a full spectrum dominance through the air, the water, the food, and information. The medical establishment is one of this. It kills more people than all the drugs and gun violence. Every year, it's like something like 250,000 people die just in this country alone through medical malpractice. But you never hear about that, right?
It's like, no, because they own the media as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where this kind of thing is. And I started finding about these corporations, but really what I started researching is like, there were some names I never even heard of, like Rothschild and Astor and Vanderbilt and Rockefeller. I heard of Rockefeller, but I never understood what they were. And so you start going into the history of these families who, if you go into like Forbes and see the richest people in the world, they never mention these names. But these are the guys that own the Federal Reserve, that create the money, that they are the ones, that generational families that have been in charge for the last 100 years.
Right.
Plus, and what's interesting is that the way they operate isn't how most people operate or think. Most people are thinking this day to day, I want to do this, this, and this. These people think decades in advance and have their agendas. And they're doing it. You can see it once your eyes are open to it. You can see what's happening. Right now, we're like in the middle of like the brink of World War III.
Right.
And it's being pushed. And I mean, someone could argue we're already in it. Currency-wise, I mean, look at the economics of the situation. We're told that the unemployment's like 4.3% or something like that. It's ridiculous. But I see, you have 100 million Americans out of work. 54 million Americans on food stamps. Or so many people taking some sort of assistance from the government. The economy is not what we're being told it is.
No, not at all.
The retail apocalypse is happening. You've got all these stores closing. I've seen just here in my town, just within the last 6 months to a year, the homelessness just explode.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about just people that are addicts, or I'm saying like whole families, and it breaks my heart, because one of the things I've learned through this is that as me personally, is I care about humanity deeply. I care about people, and I wanna do something to help. I know I can't go help everyone, but in my small way, I try to get the truth out there through, I admin the page for Stop the Crime. Um, and that's an interesting story how I got to that. I don't know if you've heard of Deborah Tavares. She's the one that runs the Stop the Crime. Started her thing, and
Well, let's talk about that then. What is stopthecrime.net, and what is your role in that?
Uh, I just admin the Facebook page. I've been doing it for about 4 years. I'm the only one that does it. I talk to people all the time through that. But wow, how that came to be was really interesting. And so this is right when I first met her, and I've only met her a couple times. When I first met her, me and my friend were going to get some copies done, and the guy that does all her web work and everything, he owns a coffee store and everything, and she started talking to us about chemtrails. Now this is right in the beginning of being awakened, and we were looking at her like, you're nuts, what are you talking about? It's like I've never heard any of this before. I was like, why would they do that? And then it turns out later when I started doing some research, and I actually looked up and like, oh my god, she's right, there's something going on here. And that just led into more. I mean, I see it every day.
I still see people denying what chemtrails are, that they're anything other than normal jet contrails.
Right. Well, I mean, if all you got to do is a research, you realize that the modern jet engines don't do that.
Right. Well, they also don't make giant tic-tac-toe signs in the sky.
No, they don't.
You'd have to fly in very specific patterns deliberately day after day to keep seeing this.
Right.
On a regular basis, and they don't do that.
Well, that's one of the things I tried to figure out was like, what is the plan here? I mean, there's obviously they've got grids that they do, and it's not just here in this country. I mean, we're seeing it. I got people in Stop the Crime that from all over the world, and they send pictures in Europe and in South America, and so this isn't just localized just to this country. There's something going on. It's like a lot of people speculate on what this is. I've heard some really outlandish stuff, but I mean, the more outlandish it is, the more there may be some truth to it. One of them's terraforming or whatever agenda is going on there. I do know that through the research I've done and watching things like why in the world are they spraying and listening to Dan, and the aluminum levels are skyrocketing. And if you look with the advent of dementia, Alzheimer's, autism, that it's just exploded over the last 20 years.
Yep.
There's something going on here, and these people's aluminum levels are just skyrocketing. But then this also, so when I found about this stuff, I'm like, oh wow, well, what about everything else? And that goes back again to the food and all the products we use, and then I started to think, well, what's this organic thing? And so it just led to this. It took a long time to like be able to see where all this was going, and it goes back to what we were talking about eugenics. There's this myth that people put out like, oh, the world's overpopulated. No, it's not.
Now, I've seen the study that the entire world's population could fit into the size of Texas with a comfortable house in a small, backyard or whatever.
It'd be about the population density of New York.
Yeah, it's kind of like, no, we're not overpopulated. We're not using the resources properly, but we're not overpopulated.
No. And well, here it goes. That goes into the thing where like, I don't know. We can't trust the numbers that we're getting out from the UN, understanding what the UN is and the World Health Organization. Again, this goes back to those families who funded those things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know what the actual population of the world is. I don't believe their numbers. I mean, it'd be really interesting to find out, but I don't know how. I've looked and I couldn't find anything on that. If anyone knows, shoot me a message. That'd be interesting. Yeah, it goes into that whole overpopulation myth and the whole the global warming hoax or climate change. And I know, they're really pushing that carbon tax thing.
Mm-hmm. That's the ultimate level of control, I would think, because they could push that on a global scale, not just the United States.
Right, and that's what they're doing. So what with knowing all, we're talking like we're kind of hitting a lot of broad different subjects here. The overpopulation, the eugenics, the poisons that we are exposed to every day. I mean, it's affecting, I think, the brain and functions of people's minds.
It would seem so.
Yeah, not to mention the fact of just putting like what's on TV. When you research what television is and who really started it, and it actually sends you into when you watch TV, it sends you into a kind of a trance.
Mm-hmm. It puts you in an alpha state.
Yeah, an alpha state.
I've always liked the phrase, there's a reason why it's called television programming.
Exactly. Because that's what's happening. So one of the biggest things I did was no cable, nothing.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying things like that. Now, our original conversation before we started doing the show was you wanted to point out the fact that you were the average person who then woke up to what's going on and started doing research.
Right.
And that's pretty much all of us. We're all the average person, and then something triggers. We see something, we hear something, whatever it happens to be, that gets us kind of raising our eyebrow and going, well, what's this all about? And it starts the path.
Right.
And everyone's kind of got their own little thing of what it was that got their attention first. With you, it sounds like it was food, GMO crops, finding out about Monsanto and how they're this pretty much giant evil corporation controlling things on a global scale.
And yeah, it led into the financial things. I mean, I admit, like one of the documentaries that really kind of set me on my heels was the original Zeitgeist. Now knowing what Peter Joseph's really about and everything, notwithstanding, but it did have some good information on the Federal Reserve.
The first one is pretty good, I would say.
Yeah, it was pretty good, and that just completely blew me away. And that's when I started really waking up to the things and realizing like how enslaved people are by this idea of having this paper and ink, and that defines you as a human being. And that's not it. I see money as a system of control. I don't define myself by, after learning this thing, I don't define myself by brand names or car I drive. I just define myself as being a good person and trying to do
But that's
good.
where you started from, right? You started off as the
yeah.
person chasing these things like most people do.
Yeah.
What changes happened in your life? Like, you started seeing this information, you started absorbing it and realizing, okay, this looks like the way things really are. What happened in your life, starting from the beginning, what changed in your life bit by bit to become where you're at now?
Yeah, I realized that I spent most of my, you have to have this good job so you can buy the stuff you don't need, and after I lost that, my whole identity, everything that I thought who I was, just crashed. So I was sitting there pretty despondent, and at times I was like, I started watching Netflix, and then I came across some of this information, and after a while it slowly, and then it started picking up faster and faster, where I started, like I said, about the food, Monsanto, eugenics, the occulted history, and I started getting into books I've never even heard of, like Tragedy and Hope. I found a plethora of information and people out there, like the alternative media. I was like, I never really got onto YouTube before, so I started looking stuff on YouTube, and I found Alex Jones. I mean, I think anyone that first starts going through this information, that's the first person you're going to see, and I went from there, and I the alternative media is really what's saving, I think, in a lot of ways, actual journalism and humanity, because are trying to put truth out there. I found people like James Corbett, Richard Grove, the X-22 report, and it started coalescing. So I started getting different perspectives than what I had ever been exposed to, because before I just watched TV, I watched CNN and the news, and I thought, oh, well, this is what it is, right? It's not. I realized,
Right.
wow, okay, I've been lied to on a huge scale here. And what I like about a lot of the alternatives, like they well, don't take our word for it. Go look for yourself. And that's what I did. And it's led me to this point now in my life where my goal is to try to spread the truth as much as I can, to be a good human being, be compassionate, let go of the fear that is all around us. And there's a lot to be afraid of, to be honest, but to get to a point where I think we're at a point now, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I think we're at a point in our society where it's time to, it's the end's coming. Like, it's time to stand up, and it's time to stand up for what you believe and stand up for what's right. Like an old saying is, I'd rather die on my feet than my knees. You know what I mean? And the economic crisis that's happening here, the constant war, the police state we're living in, and it keeps happening. But I do see a mass awakening happening now.
It does seem to be so. Hopefully it's happening on a scale large enough that we can make the changes that need to be made before anything too dreadful happens.
Right. Well, I think like what you do and what other people in alternative media, and like people are starting, like, you could just look at, people are waking up. I mean, maybe not on a huge scale, not yet, but I think it might take one of those events that they like to manufacture, and because a lot of people will be screaming about that. I want to say there's hope, and I do think there is hope for humanity. I do think there's hope for the people of this country and the world, but they have to.
It's kind of a twofold thing. Like, for instance, as of today, I have somewhere around 150,000 views on my channel. That's really good for most people. But considering the level of information that we're talking about, I think I'd feel better about things if that was in the millions.
Yeah.
That people are taking it and spreading it. You know what I mean? Like, they're saying, wow, they're talking about some heavy topics. People need to know this. I'm going to take this and I'm going to keep bouncing it to other people. That's right. What I do this for. I do this to get the information out there so that people will. I'm passing it to you now. You pass it to the next one.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And then, well, there's another flip side to this coin, being that there is mass censorship out there. I noticed that with a lot of things I post on Stop the Crime. Certain things will get a lot of views, and some things get none, like very little, like double digits. And it's interesting. I've been tracking what it is. And if you talk anything about or post videos or anything about Syria or financial things, or anything that, especially anything that criticizes Israel, you're not getting it. And so I kind of wonder, like, how much.
Are you referring to YouTube or Facebook, or?
I'm talking about Facebook. Of course, we know it's all being monitored. YouTube too. I mean, I think that what we need really is an open source. We get away from these corporations who run this stuff. We need is an open source technology that has people can have access and spread information without censorship. And they seem to be every day clamping harder and harder on this stuff,
I think the overall problem is server space.
Yeah.
That now if some millionaire wants to come forward and be like, okay, I'm going to make an open source YouTube, basically, I'm going to donate, here's the servers, you have more than enough space to do this for years to come.
Yeah.
It's free, you make your account, you have your own channel, you do what you want. That would be ideal, and if you want to see how quickly tyranny would come down, I think that you wouldn't see that last very long.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. Well, I mean, there are people that there's like I don't know if you've ever heard of Sibel Edmonds.
Yes.
Okay, Blowing Frogs. And she's starting a new thing called Newsbud. It's all independent journalism, and they're doing I think a Kickstarter campaign, trying to get um, money together so they can, and they have a bunch of really great journalists and people in the truth movement, that great writers. James Corbett will be involved with that, and a bunch of other ones involved in trying to set up an actual independent journalism channel. And like they'll actually, the way she explained it is like they want to have funding so they can send people in a camera crew to these events that happen and get not the CNN version of it. You know what I mean? Like these are the kind of things that I think are very important now. It's like how long that will last, I don't know. It seems that the elites, like we were talking, it seems like they're getting desperate right now. They're getting more and more scared.
I've heard other people say that. I don't know if that's true or not. From what I understand from the documentation I've researched over the years, their original intention was to have this New World Order in place by 2000. Obviously, that didn't happen, at least not in a full, complete control sort of scenario. So, what do we have on September 11th, 2001? We have an event that kind of puts things back on track for them, I would hypothesize. Gives them excuses to use the U.S. military, which they've always used as their police force, to go to places that they may not have been able to justify going to before, and really start solidifying their power structure globally, and not just the control of the United States, which is obviously the economic powerhouse of the world, or traditionally had been. And now whether this is the thing that they needed to really complete their grand scheme, I don't know. But it seems that they're not where they need to be. I guess it would be the right way to put it. It seems like that they didn't anticipate the way technology would go. I always point out that the internet is the double-edged sword. They can use it for the propaganda that they want to distribute, but the people, the average guy, as you like to say, we used it as a weapon as well. And that's why we have this mass awakening. If we didn't have the internet as it is now, it would be no different than 1950s propaganda of, communists hiding in your soup.
Yeah.
That's being put in your local paper.
No, I agree. And I also like to point out when I talk about this New World Order, or really actually an old world order, but these people aren't omnipresent. They're not gods. Like there's one thing that no matter how much tyranny they bring down on a people, it's like you have the human spirit, and that will always win. They may be able to crush dissent to a certain extent, but they'll never be able to get rid of it totally. I know they're going to try, and they are. But I firmly believe that human spirit, that we can stop this.
I think things have been stopped in certain ways. I think if people hadn't jumped all over it, I would theorize that Syria would be invaded by now.
Oh yeah, well they stopped it a couple of years ago when they tried to bomb it in there, and then English and they just were like, no, we're not doing this. But they got in anyway. And right after that, what happened? ISIS.
Sure, good. Right. I'm sure they have backup plans of backup plans. And then there's the whole false flag thing of all the bombings and incidents like that. But people tore those to shreds. And I would think that those were instituted for gun control, because the one thing, if I had to conjecture, that is keeping them from completely clamping down on the United States is the fact that so many people have firearms.
I agree.
And because so many independent journalists did their homework on these fronts, I think it probably held back massive gun legislature.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Second Amendment, is a very good thing. I to be honest with you, I used to be really anti-gun. I'm not anymore. I realize what it's for, And I think you're right. I think it is stopped here at least.
You know, the easiest way to look at the Second Amendment is you can make gun control laws all day long. Nothing is going to stop the bad guy getting a gun and hurting a civilian. You're not going to stop them. There's too much available on the black market. All gun control really does is stop the average person from getting a weapon to protect themselves. And I know a lot of people probably jump up and down screaming that's not true, but it really is. You've never heard of a criminal who actually wants a weapon to do something having trouble getting it. He's not going to walk into a gun shop and apply for a license and get denied and go, oh, shucks.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, it's the conditioning too. I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of women in particular. Some women are really just totally terrified of guns. So I ask this question. I was like, okay, someone's breaking into your house to rape you and hurt your children. What are you going to do? You can call the police after the fact if they show up, or you have a firearm to protect you, and they get really uncomfortable with that. And it just blows me away. I'm like, you have a natural right to defend yourself.
You do, and a lot of people don't realize it's not the police's job to actually do what you just said. That's not their job. If they're available and they're around, sure, they can intervene, but it's really not in their mandate to stop crime.
Well, yeah, it's like that the Supreme Court decision in 2005 where they said that police are not there to protect the citizens.
That's my point. They outright say that in the public. So,
right. And
it's your job to protect you.
Yeah. And, well, that's what's really interesting is that I've noticed the police over the last 10 years. I mean, they're getting more and more. They look more and more like soldiers every day. Even the small town I live in, they got full body armor, all black.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
it's insane. I was like, what are you guys doing? I mean, what are you afraid of? I mean, it's like...
No, it's obvious that they're being changed into something else. It's not Andy Griffith being the good old boy sheriff who's friends with everyone in the town, making sure everything's okay, which is what police are supposed to be. They are being, and they pretty much have been now transformed into a paramilitary organization. They have military-grade gear.
Yep, they do. And I stay away from them as much as possible.
Probably a wise move. That's not to say all police are bad, but it's also obvious what they're doing with the modern younger police forces. They're getting former military veterans, a lot of whom have
issues,
PTSD. And this is a plan. This is obvious that this is what's being done. They're sending young men and women overseas to do God knows what sort of horrible things. It's psychologically damaging them. It's breaking them, and then they're being sent back here. They're emotionally damaged, and now they're here to crack heads on the home front.
Yeah, well, let's not even talk about that. Most of the police are on some sort of SSRI too.
Well, they're also taught that we're the enemy.
Yeah. It's
been admitted by many police officers. They call us civilians. Well, a police officer is a civilian too. You're not in the military.
Right.
We're all civilians. We're all the same, but you're being taught that we're not, and that makes a division in your mind that you are separate from us. And the reality is, no, you are not.
No, you're 100% correct. And they are afforded no more rights than we are. Although it seems to be changing now. They have rights, we don't. And that thin blue line, or whatever they want to call it. All you got to do is go on YouTube and just see this horrendous. That's one thing technology has helped, is like now you got all these cell phone cameras and you're just seeing these atrocious things that police are doing. And again, I'm saying not all police are bad. They're not. But like what Mark Passio did, I mean, he really just codified it, was the order followers. And the worst things ever done in human history are by order followers.
Yes. And that's the conscious excuse that they say to themselves, well, I was just following orders. There's no way you could justify the atrocities that we're seeing now.
Right. Well, they're morally culpable for it, even though they don't want to look at it that way.
Right.
It doesn't matter if someone tells you to do something. You have a moral right to say, no, this is wrong. But that's not what they're doing. And
by having these emotionally damaged people who are used to following orders in the military, and that's what got them in that position in the first place, they're just going to go right along with it. And obviously, that's intentional. That is the plan.
I agree. It is, and it's very apparent. You got to see it. I mean, to see it in wherever city you live, and look how they behave, look how they carry themselves. I'm not saying that all cops are bad.
No, they're still good ones. I meet a lot of police officers in the work that I do, and most of them are actually pretty nice folks. I can tell which ones are former military and not, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And they do speak to me differently, even though I'm addressing them in a professional manner, because I am a manager for a very large corporation. And, it's obvious to me. I'm addressing them in a professional manner, but I can tell that there's differences between what these people's backgrounds are.
Right. I agree. I've been dealing with law enforcement in my professionally for 20 years, and I've seen just like just this huge, just whole attitude change. Like you said, you can tell the ones are ex-military and the ones are not. But to be honest, police scare me, and they should. I would never, I heard someone say something really, really interesting. Like, there's no situation you can't make worse by calling law enforcement, which is true. So I think, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is we have a natural right to defend ourselves against anything, including them. However, it's the police state and the surveillance state, especially now that the FBI and the NSA are going to be sharing information with different countries about American citizens, and same thing with GCHQ and MI6 and all those other alphabet organizations. We're being monitored constantly.
Well, that sounds like behind the scenes they are already tightening up this infrastructure of what would be a New World Order system.
Yes.
Sure. It's not just about countries now. Now it's about the entire world being integrated, and you can't escape no matter where you go.
We're talking about this New World Order thing, and my main focus, I do care about the world, but I'm focused a lot more on what's happening in our own country. It seems that the United States has been heavily targeted by these people. I think they're afraid of the people here, of the independence that people used to have, or still in a lot of ways are. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights have to say that these things are perfect. They're not. However, they are pretty an antithesis to global control. They want to get rid of them. In a lot of ways, they have.
They have, but I think they have to do it in increments. They can't do any one thing too quickly, or else people will notice, because we have this integrated communications network now. If they do any one really big thing super quick, it'll be all over the place and people will be communicating about it and informing one another. So that's why I think they had to slow down radically.
Right.
Because they have to integrate these things one piece at a time now, whereas years ago, where they could really control information, they could get away with things on a global scale in a different manner than they can today.
Right. Well, that's what I said earlier about the incrementalism. This is how they operate.
Right.
Right. But every now and then there'll be a event, like 9/11 or the Boston bombing or whatever.
I think 9/11 was probably the last big one, because right after that is when cell phone technology exploded, and we're all walking around with computers in our pockets now.
Right.
With live cameras. So I think they have to do things in a very different manner now. I don't know if they could pull off a 9/11 style event, like something of that size in the country anyway.
It would depend. The thing that worries me about that is that it would have to be something pretty horrendous. Massive.
It'd have to be, massive and so convoluted that no matter what information you came out about, it didn't change the fact of how heavy it was. For instance, a nuclear device going off somewhere.
Or biological or something like that.
Yeah, or some sort of massive event like that you're going to have so much information you wouldn't know what to believe, but the effect is still the same. If a nuclear device went off, I mean, the devastation from that is unimaginable, really.
Right. No, yeah, and that would be, or I'm kind of thinking, I'm kind of leaning towards more. I think what's going to lead to something. Not to say that something like that will happen. I don't know, and I hope not. But I'm more looking at the financial collapse of the Western banking system, which seems to be being engineered right now. We're seeing it right now.
Oh, I think that they're absolutely slowly but surely dragging us down into that, and they've got their own. The banksters have their own finances secured in their various ways so that they will still have financial control globally,
Right.
while we are reduced to abject poverty.
Yes, I think that is the biggest threat we have right now, and it's already happening. And a lot of people want to talk about the BRICS nations. You look at Russia and China and what they're doing with the Shanghai Gold Exchange and setting up a different, rivaling the IMF. But in reality, it's still central banking. It's just a different flavor.
Oh, sure. If I remember correctly, there's only a handful of countries left on the planet that don't have a central bank, and I think that number is down to 3, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and those are the ones they're going after.
Wow, really? Like big surprise there, huh?
I know, huh? It's like remember when they invaded Libya and completely destroyed that country within a week. Yep, they got a central bank.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious to people who are in the know.
Yeah, and it's Iran is one that does not, and they're in Syria, did not. And those are the ones that they're targeting now. But again, like I say, a lot of people I talk to, especially about in economics, they say like, well, the BRICS, they're a bit Russia and China, they're great. I was like, no, they're not. It's just the same thing. It's all you got to do is go research a little bit on China and see, who's involved. There's no mistake why all the manufacturing from this country went there. There's no mistake that all these corporations have headquarters. There's no mistake that Kissinger was there and Rockefeller loves the place, and so this isn't going to be a better thing.
Well, bottom line with China is they use slave workers to produce goods.
Yes.
That is a fact.
Yes.
You can deny it all you want, but that is what is going on there. And yes, slaves cost less to manufacture goods than decently paid workers.
Yes.
So that is the current economic system.
Yes. That's the planned obsolescence, too. And that's another concept that a lot of people don't really understand, is that they make these devices like phones and computers only to last a year or two. Then you got to go buy a new one. Well, that's enslavement right there. Not to mention the environmental impact of that system is devastating. And that's what, like we were talking about earlier about the climate change and this whole global warming hoax that there have been. Well, it's gone from global warming to climate change now. Okay.
Yeah, notice they had to change when people started poking holes in the other one.
Yeah, see, they blame us for the things that the system they created, and I think a lot of people get really mixed up. Yes, is there ecological destruction happening? Oh yeah, are we polluting our ecosystem? 100%, but that doesn't translate to the climate change thing. That's how they've been able to get this whole green movement, just to go, and they've put these two things together, and they're two separate concepts.
Mm-hmm.
There's things together, and I have a real problem with we know that their climate change thing is like, I remember in the 80s, we're in an ice age. You could go look up at the Time magazine cover.
I also remember from the 80s they're making the huge deal about the ozone layer and holes in the atmosphere and all that. And I lived through all that, and we're still here.
Yeah, it's all your fault because you used hairspray, or whatever.
And there may have been some validity to that,
yeah,
but we seem okay now.
Yeah, I mean, I do think one of the biggest things, as far as like we were talking about earlier, is the geoengineering. If you say, I notice though, when you talk to people about, especially hidden plain sight, it's right above your head, you can see it. But if you use certain words like chemtrails. That's the automatic turnoff. That's like, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. But if you go into it and say, well, this is geoengineering. This is something. There is 150 different patents for these things. They've been doing it since this, Vietnam, or probably before. I would say the late 40s.
They've been able to steer hurricanes and things like that since the 60s, which means they had to have been doing research into geoengineering before that.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like going down this rabbit hole, the one I went down, I'm still going down, is like there's a guy I never even heard of before named Tesla. You start looking at what he was working on and what he was about, and you look at these the HARP facilities and the like you were saying, like steering hurricanes, creating earthquakes. This is all in the realm of possibility, and I have no doubt that they've used it. And I mean, I know that sounds, to that average person that's never been exposed to that, I mean, that sounds crazy. Well, no, you can't cause earthquakes. Well, yes, they can. It's harmonics. That's all it is.
Well, the universe works off of frequencies. So if you understand what frequency is what, and you now know how to manipulate it.
Right. I mean, you're a musician. You understand that very clearly.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, so the frequency is, and that's something that's been hidden from, and I think that's one of the things that Tesla was able to do. He created the free energy, and just from what I've understood, it was amazing. Yet again, technology suppressed, and I've heard different sources say, well, yeah, it's probably maybe a good thing that it was suppressed, because I mean, he had some pretty radical ideas, and super weapons, and I don't know.
He did, but he also wanted to give everyone free electricity.
Yes.
Which means they couldn't put a meter on it and charge you.
Mm-hmm.
So that
yeah, J.P. Morgan destroyed him.
Right, and Westinghouse too, I believe.
Yes.
And I kind of think that when you boil it down, energy is the overall means of control.
Right.
If free energy existed, a huge burden would be lifted off each and every human being trying to exist.
Exactly.
Because then you could produce so much more of what drives our global economy. Well, the cost would be minimalized massively. And I do believe that technology exists, but we're never going to get it in the current state.
Oh, no. Well, this is an interesting side note to this, and this is one of the things that I haven't gotten too much into, but I've listened to a couple things and read some articles. I want to do more research on this, but learning about that oil is not a fossil fuel, but it is abiotic. In other words, it regenerates.
Yes. From what I understand from the research I've seen, it is a lubricant for the tectonic plates of the planet.
Mm-hmm. And so it isn't the artificial scarcity is another way of we were talking about earlier. Artificial scarcity is also a way of control. There is actually plenty of everything for every human being on this planet.
Very much so. And let me tell you a memory I have from 3rd grade where they showed us a film about all of the fossil fuels and how long they had to last. So they were implanting in our young minds, and I was in the advanced program, so they were discussing this concept with us about when you grow up, there's only going to be X amount of years for coal, gas, oil. So this was being implanted in us from a very young age, and I still remember very distinctly thinking, well, that's going to have very heavy consequences when I'm an adult. Turns out it wasn't true at all.
No, it's not. Yeah, that's yes. I remember being subjected to some of that stuff too. I think about it. There was this theory that there was this really good investigative journalist named Michael Rupert, and he had some really interesting. He's the one that broke the case open, proving that the CIA was bringing in cocaine in through Arkansas and the whole Clinton thing. And
yeah, he did. He's the only thing I don't like about him. He was all into that peak oil thing, and I know that's not true. So I don't know what was up with him. I don't know if he was a disinfo agent or if he would just believed in something that just wasn't true, but I don't think he was right about that in any way, shape, or form.
No, I don't either. But he did have some information. I mean, yeah, I'm not, after learning more about, because that movie, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie Collapse, the one he did.
Yeah, I did a few years ago.
Yeah, that really shook me that was like one of the first documentaries I watched during this thing, and I was like, oh my god, the world's gonna end. We have peak oil. Then later, more research and more learning I do, I figured out, well, no, this isn't exactly true. Take aside his peak oil theory, but his other stuff is very good. The peak oil thing is obviously all you got to do is look at the oil markets now. They got tankers sitting out in the Pacific and Atlantic full of oil.
It's not scarce. Well, let me put you this way: gas was $1.39 here in the year 2016, where I live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. $1.39. That's what prices were, I don't know, around 16 years ago. Okay, so if they can produce it that cheaply, with obviously we know a lot of inflation has happened in nearly 20 years. It's not true,
Yeah, no, it isn't. And I mean, I live in California, but of course, Northern California gets raised on the gas.
Well, you're paying double what I am, but that's also got to do with that heavy tax that they're hitting you with too.
California's terrible. Just that whole scene, and I think that is one of the systems of control. Is like you said, the energy and the manipulation. I say this again goes into the manipulation of information and truth, and realizing that I do believe that I sincerely believe that the oil thing is what we've been told is not true. I mean, you can they're actually, if you go back and you look at early turn of the century here, a lot of oil wasn't used for most engines. It was alcohol.
That's correct.
And alcohol, we can make that in our own backyard if you want. It takes any kind of organic material to make an actual efficient engine. It burns, but that was completely. And I started learning. Actually, it's pretty funny because I never put these two together until recently. So about the same time that you had these competing agendas, Rockefeller, Standard Oil against the alcohol producers for engines, you had Prohibition come in. And the real reason behind Prohibition wasn't about, I mean, they used the Women's Christian Temperance Union as a front, but it was really about destroying the alcohol fuel industry in this country, which they did utterly.
Yeah, because all the farmers had stills on their property.
Yeah. And we could actually, I mean, there's actually a renewable source of energy that's clean. But no, it's like, what I mean, that's just one. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, like when you start waking up to all this information and you start finding things out like that, you're like, wow, what else don't I know? And then, it's just, it goes from there,
That's right.
So it's like and one of the things I realize is that this journey for me, it's never going to stop. I'm going to be learning. There's not a day goes by where I don't learn something new. And I will continue to, as long as I live, I'll still do it. And still learn and try to effectively communicate with people about it instead of, like, I know we were talking off the air, we were talking about you can't, like when you're first given this information, whether it be about 9/11, chemtrails, Monsanto, the Federal Reserve, you're getting bombarded with all this stuff, and then you just want to go out there and scream at people and just, why don't you see this? Why don't you see this? Bludgeon you over the head with this information.
Right. There's usually the anger factor that kicks in with the newly awakened person. They're like, oh my God, this is going on. This is real. And, you want to jump up and down and scream.
Right. And that's, you can't, that doesn't work. Most people are going to go, no, piss off. I don't want anything to do with you. So what I found is, like, when you talk to people that have not been exposed to this information, so you kind of got to gather who you're dealing with in the first place, what their intellectual capabilities are. But what I found is really a doorway for people to find out more is what's dearest to everyone's heart: money. And you start with that. You said, you know what the Federal Reserve is? Well, here, I'm going to give you some information. Check this out with the fiat currency and what, the continuation of debt and our debt slaves and just here. And that has that, depending upon what the person you're dealing with, that usually opens the door and they start looking and start lurking, and then they come back and ask questions, and then that's how you get them hooked. So well, here, don't take my word for it. Go look for yourself.
And that's the easy stuff. That is an easy way to get someone to realize that the mainstream history and point of view they were taught, it's not real. The Federal Reserve is a private institution owned by 12 constituent parts.
Yep.
And you find out it's very commonly heard names of families that have control of this organization. Rockefeller, Rothschild, Astor. You've heard these names before.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. Like, again, when I went back, we were talking about Common Core and my daughter's history book. Those names never show up. And in fact, when I went to college in history, I never heard of the Rothschilds. This is a name everyone should know. Estimated $500 trillion worth of wealth, of half the world's wealth or whatever. I don't know. Who knows?
There's no accurate number, but it's obvious they have. I don't think the word substantial wealth is even accurate. Yeah. Goodness only knows how many pies they have their thumbs in.
All of them, I think. I mean, yeah, that was a name I've never even heard of until I started doing research and awakened. And it's like we were just saying, you start with people with money, and then it kind of, okay, well, what leads to different things. And then you kind of, okay, we'll check this out. And then there's like we had talked about earlier, like there's this whole, there's a truth of where we live in, as far as banking and GMOs and chemtrails and eugenics, but there's this there's flip side about it. And there's the very bizarre occultism that is, we are completely saturated in corporate logos, the propaganda that's put on TV. I mean, my God, have you seen? I know you've seen this.
Sure.
Satanic, weird, like the Super Bowl shows. Look at the videos that are being put out.
Yeah, they're doing it right in front of us, and it's it's so blatant now. Like, I understand back in the '80s, it was a lot more. They're just kind of throwing hand signs up or doing little symbols and things, but now you got people strutting up and down in front of pyramids and all this kind of, just really blatant stuff. It's really amazing to me that more people aren't getting it. It's like, you don't think that's a little odd, I know,
it's like you got Madonna dressed as Baphomet. I mean, give me a break. It's like, look at some of this stuff. I mean, the videos and the music. I mean, that's a whole other show, talking about music in Hollywood.
Well, that's all their means of control.
Yeah.
It goes back to what their religion is. This whole sympathetic magic thing they do, where they put the symbolism storyline out there of what it is they want to happen, thinking that it gives them the power to do so. And also they have this weird code of ethics, it seems, that, well, we told you what we were going to do and you didn't protest, so that made it okay.
I've heard that many a time.
Yeah, and it's like, no, that doesn't make it okay. No. What would make it okay is that you put out a press release on a global scale saying, by the way, we're going to knock down the Twin Towers on September 11, 2001. Are you okay with this? That's saying what you're going to do and then doing it.
Exactly. And, well, yeah, like, that weird more... I'm in an opinion now after reading all this stuff, and kind of we have two types of humans now. We have us, and then this 1% that lives in this psychopathic world of occultist, this weird satanic Luciferian. And understand, I'm not religious in any way, but I mean, I see this kind of the symbolism. It's just rampant everywhere, and it's in the movies, and it's like pretty much every movie put out by Hollywood now has. I mean, you can pick it out once you realize what you're looking at. I have a real hard time watching movies now because I just see the propaganda in it, and it's like,
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, I'll give you a really good example, really blatant propaganda that they're coming out with 2 movies now about the Boston bombing. One's called Boston Strong, and I don't remember the name. And I started reading some of the experts of this, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And it's,
That sounds like damage control to me, because the Boston bombing incident has just been torn to shreds by a lot of people.
oh yeah,
I've interviewed people who've just really had very definitive evidence on what was faked.
yeah. I've seen a lot of that, and it's just it looked like a classic, not classic, but a false flag of some sort. And and there's like people like Jim Fetzer that did the Sandy Hook stuff, and, I mean,
Yeah, and there's very definitive evidence for that as well.
yeah,
The thing is, since 9/11 happened, a lot of people who are even rudimentarily awake to things, they're looking for incidents now. If something happens, they're gonna be like, okay, how fishy is this? And they're gonna tear it apart. Because no matter what anyone wants to say about 9/11, the bottom line is what the official story released by the government said is not accurate. That I think is the easiest truthful statement I can make before we start tearing into it. There's a lot of factors that even I'm not sure about what really happened. There's a lot of theories, but the bottom line is we were fed a lie.
yeah. And the best way, 9/11 is a whole other. I mean, like trying to get people to wake up to that. I would say at this point, most Americans realize that at least 80%. I saw in that poll said that there serious questions about it, not believing them.
Right, and they should. The problem is the people who don't question it pretty much have not looked. They're people who have not looked into it, because once you do look into it, you automatically see glaring inaccuracies. The people who don't want to question it are ones who just refuse to even look at anything.
Yeah, it's easier to take the official narrative and say, oh, it's Muslim terrorists, and then actually the reality of the fact that this was done by factions of our own government, Israel, and so on and so forth. And all you got to really do, I mean, there's so much information, there's so many people that did so much great work on 9/11. It's just amazing, follow the money. And James Corbett did this excellent podcast on that, and Richard Grove. I mean, the information's there. I mean, if you're at this point, you want to sit there and believe that, then I don't know what to tell you. It's like you're not going to get through to those people.
Right. If you look, you're going to find it, and you're not going to find the exact answer, but you are going to know that there was very, very, very dirty goings on with all that.
Yes, it like most of all these things that happen, they're multifaceted. There isn't just one thing that's going on, and that's
no. It's not like there was. I'm always amused at the allegory of George Bush standing there with big red shiny button in his hand, pushes it, and boom, everything goes. No, that's not what happened.
No.
There's a spider web going on behind the scenes of Saudi connections and all. That's what was going on. There's all different factions that contributed to the overall event. That's never going to get put in the 9/11 Commission report, and that you're going to read. You're not going to know those things.
No, you won't. And unless you do your own research. Again, you got to. This goes back, full circle to talk about critical thinking. Again, you got to figure out what people have been so desensitized that they are overstimulated. I don't know what word you want to use. That they can't even see what's right in their face. They can't. It's like their whole. It's a stimulus, emotional response to everything. So there's like no thinking, like we were just talking about geoengineering or whatever. It's right up above your head, but you don't see it. It's hidden in plain sight. That's how they get away with this kind of stuff. That's what 9/11's hidden. Obviously, something was going on there. It's hidden in plain sight, right? It's all the money. Like, who benefited from this thing? Well, it wasn't us. It was definitely, we're not allowed to ever talk about Israel, but obviously they're involved in that. And,
of course.
And that's a whole nother subject. God. Israel is just like, the more I learn about that, and I'll preface this saying that I don't have any problems with the Jewish people or anything. It's their government and the Zionist agenda that I have a problem with.
Well, that's exactly it. There's a difference between the Jewish peoples and Zionism. Those are two different things.
Yes. But, the way they have got it set up right now is if you question anything, you're an anti-Semite or you're a racist. I'm like, no.
Well, what an amazing failsafe that they have built in for themselves.
Oh, yes, that is awesome. But it seems to be a lot of it been breaking down. You can only keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again besides people, especially now, like you said earlier, with the advent of the internet, to see it like, come on, this isn't, no one's buying this anymore. Enough are, but I see like a lot of people questioning, like, why are we funding these people? Like, what's going on? That whole the BDS movement, the boycott products made in Israel. That's happened all over Europe, and like they're actually trying to stop that, like make it illegal to question that, make it illegal to do that in certain countries,
right?
Which is pretty crazy.
That is, yes.
So that's a whole nother nutshell. Israel is like that's a good year's worth of research right there.
Fortunately, there are a lot of people out there doing that research and doing a good job of it, I think.
Yeah, I do too. And I've listened to so many. Like Ken O'Keefe is one I really respect. That guy. He's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
He just speaks. He just speaks it out. He doesn't. He's not
doesn't hold back now.
No, not at all.
I like that. I'm a pretty straightforward person too, so I kind of like just, hey, just say it.
Yeah, and there's no reason to beat around the bush on this. And it's like we're really at a point in our history. I mean, this in a lot of ways it's scary right now, but it's an incredible time to be alive too.
It is, and we live in a time where we have a lot of tools available to us. For instance, the internet being the big one. And let's talk about what stopthecrime.net is, what it is you're involved with, and how you're using these tools to pass along good information to the rest of the average people out there.
Okay. Stopthecrime.net belongs. It's Deborah Traverse's page. I'm just the admin. You can. There's a website. What I try to do with that is I go on Facebook and I find memes and articles, because I scour all the independent media for YouTube, and I post articles, videos every now and then. I will write things. I notice though when I write certain things that it gets pretty censored. It doesn't reach a lot of people. So I'm still trying to get the word out on truth, what's going on in our actual country. I am heavily anti-war. So I'm trying to get the different narratives out there about what's going on in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, the police state here. So I kind of I hit a whole gambit of things. Like we talked about eugenics to the truth movement. I interact with people. They have questions. They'll send me questions, and we'll talk. And I like to get other people's perspectives on stuff. That's how we learn. So that's basically what I'm doing for right now. Eventually, we'll be doing a YouTube channel and podcast. And so we'll talk off air on that and give me some pointers on that. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just a guy that sees truth and wants to spread it and wants people to be free.
Now, you said you woke up about 5 years ago. How long did it take you after you started researching this material to really want to become involved, become what we generally call an activist?
I would say over the last 2 years, because I got to the point. I'm at a point now where I was like, I don't want to work. I have a dead-end slave job. It's like, this isn't what I want to do. This is not. I found it took me. I'm 42. It's taken me almost 40 years to find out what I'm really passionate about, and I'm passionate about this deeply, and I want to get involved in it. The time for sitting around and just waiting for things to happen is ended. we have to do something. I mean, even if it's just little things, it doesn't have to be like big, huge, like marching signs and trying to get petitions signed. That stuff doesn't work. We need to get information out there to as many people as possible, right? But in a way that that is palatable to someone that's never been exposed to this information. That's there's a kicker, right? So
right, we have to deliver this information in a way that it reaches the broadest appeal.
Right.
If you come off too over the top, a lot of people are going to get turned off right from the beginning.
Right. So yeah, that's the. But we're also out of time. I think, like you were talking about earlier, it's like things are rapidly. Whatever agenda, or the agenda is, it's rapidly. I would say over this in the last year, I've seen it. It's escalating majorly, especially on the economic front and the war and everything. And I'm just going to speak for here in America. As Americans, are you still willing to send your sons and daughters to die for banksters?
Well, the answer is yes, because they don't think that's what's going on. They're still convinced that they're going into the military to serve their country, patriotically defending our country, which I respect. It's just not correct.
No. And that's a hard thing to talk about, patriotism. That is like, because that's another side of this story. That's a really hard one to get. So what I say to people is, okay, that's fine. And, I can respect that. But I say, well, can you explain to me then why 22 veterans a day are killing themselves here? Yeah, look it up.
Right. Well, from the way I understand it, people are going into the military. They're going overseas and seeing the truth, all these atrocities, and finding out pretty quickly what exactly is actually going on.
Right. And then you also have to do is go look on the FBI and NSA website. Who do they consider the most threat domestically to them as returning veterans? Why?
And why would that be? Exactly. Let's ask that question. Why would that be? I don't know, because they probably know more of what's really going on, and you trained them to be a weapon?
Yeah, they know how to fight, and a lot of them are coming back going, no, man, this is something, no. And that they're scared. They're scared of that. Yeah, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. They created these weapons, as you eloquently put. Now they're coming home damaged, or in a lot of places, a lot of times, just saw horrible and were told to do horrible things, and now they're angry because they weren't over there defending freedom and democracy and bringing peace or whatever line of crap that they're told. That's not what they're doing. And so the biggest threat to, I think, to the government or the establishment is these people, because they know how to fight, right? And I'll put this on record. I said I do not want a civil war here.
No, not at all.
I do not want it. No, I mean, it may come to that, but I think that we need a war on. We're fighting a war on consciousness.
Yes,
that's how we're going to get it. I mean, it may come to a violent thing. I hope not. It's because
no, that should be avoided at all costs. One of the things we should be really working very hard to is to keep bullets from flying.
Yes. Because
no blood needs to be shed over this. This is an information war. I've always agreed with that concept. And what we're fighting for is to awaken minds in time, enough minds in time, to prevent it from becoming a physical conflict. Because there's nothing more dangerous than the ignorant.
Yes, this is true. And ignorance with guns. So, yeah, no, I agree. Part of me is like, totally agree with it's a war on consciousness. We have to wake people up, and not violently. But there's this other little part of my head that says, I don't want it, but it may come to that point. I don't know. I hope not, because
that should be the last thing, because there's too many variables once it becomes a physical confrontation, because goodness only knows which way people are going to turn, because you're still going to have people who think that they're defending their country that are going to fight against other people who think they're defending their country. Like, it's going to be a very messy, bloody thing, and we need to do everything we possibly can to prevent that from ever happening. I'm absolutely not in favor of violence.
No, neither am I. But one of the things that makes me think about it is like it seems like that's what they want. That'd be the biggest time to get control, right?
Well, I'm assuming that the powers that be think that they would win that battle because they've got more people to carry out what it is they want. They've got the bigger weapons, the bigger guns. They've got all that. So that's what I can see why they're keeping all of this black versus white, religious
Yes.
battles.
Well,
No matter what it is,
divided.
they're right. They're keeping everyone divided, and they keep coming up with different issues to keep everyone stirred up, so that we're not unifying. That there is no unified, aware mind targeting the real enemy, which is these elite banksters.
There is not, and that's people get. It's so obvious because the whole Black Lives Matter, and they're I think inciting a race war in a way, because if you keep people like you just said, if you keep people divided and in different camps, they're easier to control. Fear, right? That's what's used.
Right, and it's keeping everyone from working towards the same unified goal because now they're busy fighting each other. Well, divide and conquer has been a military tactic for a very, very long time.
Oh yes, and it is so apparent. Once you wake up to see this of how they're doing this,
it's very apparent. All you got to do is step back and look at it, and it's like it's so obvious what they're doing. I mean, they've got. I mean, just to use the racial issue as an example, there's race baiters paid in the media all the time.
Oh yeah.
Good example being Al Sharpton.
Oh God, yeah. That guy. Yes, exactly. I mean, on both sides too, and it's what And I talk to people, every race, creed, and color, and religion. And one of the things I always tell them when we're talking about things like this, it's like we are all being screwed over by the same people. Doesn't matter if you're yellow, purple, white, black, whatever.
Yep, that's true.
We are all being screwed over by the same people. So we need to put aside our differences on ideologically or whatever and look at what's really going on. And that's where I always come back into the money thing and talk about people about money. And this is because that's really the head of the snake is a financial institution.
Right. That is how they're controlling everything, is by the top down through the financial resources. Because if you have that, it doesn't matter who's got a gun because they can make it so you can't eat.
Yes.
And that's very important, folks. You gotta really realize where the true power structure is, and it's in the central banks.
Yes, 100%. So, having said all this, there are solutions, and that's another things that people need to focus on. And one of them is localism. Is get involved in your local community, grow your own food. Have a garden. Take back get involved with other people around your area. I mean, it's probably harder to do in a bigger city, I imagine, but I live in a rural area. Oh yeah, for sure. I've seen like people doing like in New York doing these huge garden co-ops,
mm-hmm.
and that's taking the power back from them. Is doing things like that, becoming self-sufficient.
Yes.
As much as you possibly can. I know they're making it all illegal for people to collect rainwater on their property, which is insane.
It's absurd, and that needs to be fought on every level.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, for sure. But like how to do a garden, like we got we'll be doing a garden this year. We're gonna have a big one. We got chickens. There's little chicks right now, but we're gonna have chickens soon. And try to do as much as we can. I think this is getting involved, and even if you don't have the space for a garden, there's always, like I know there's places where I live that they have land granted by this whatever, and people go do their gardening and make it a co-op. I mean, there are solutions to this. One of the solutions is getting the right information, being able to communicate the right information, take responsibility for your life. So all I can say is take responsibility for your information and what you're doing. Don't put it on anyone else. You have a right to live your life in peace, and you don't have to live in fear. This information may come scary, but it's empowering too.
It is. You have to get over that initial fear of like, oh my God, everything's a lie. Well, for the most part, yes. But you get a grip and you go, okay, well, I don't want to live in a world like this. So what is it we can do to make things better?
Yeah.
And I've always promoted the concept of don't try and change, for instance, the White House, Washington. It's very unlikely that's going to happen. But what you can do, and what everyone should be doing, is focusing on a local level. Because if each one of us is focusing on our local level, we are working as a united front. We're all doing our own part right where we are. I can't really do a heck of a lot in Seattle, Washington from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but if you do something in Seattle and I'm doing something in Baton Rouge and you're doing something in Santa Rosa, and then multiply that many, many times over, now we're making a difference. If we take back our local governments with awake folks who know the real agenda, get them into office and just work your way up that pyramid, now you're making a difference.
Yes. And that's really the only thing I always tell people. I don't vote just because it's a waste of time, at least on the bigger things. But locally, you have more of a chance. I mean, you could even run for office if you wanted, or whatever. You have more of a chance of actually affecting change in your local communities. You have no chance of affecting any change in the bigger scheme things. Just,
My recommendation, especially on a local level, is don't go into it wanting to be a career politician. Go into it and say, no, I'm going to go in and see what's really going on, and then I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell everybody. If you ran on a platform like that, especially on a smaller level where you can speak directly to who would be your constituency, I think people might actually start getting elected, because you'd immediately see all the career people who have the money behind them trying to attack you and be like, hey man, I'm not in this to be a politician. I want to get into the governmental body to expose what's going on and show, okay, this is what's really going on here in Baton Rouge.
No.
And I'm not interested in being a politician, but I'm just using that as the example.
Well, no, I 100% agree. I mean, to be honest, like I come from a kind of an anarchist stance, I guess you could say. So I don't really see government as
a necessary thing.
Yeah.
I love what anarchy really is supposed to be about. It's not about chaos. It's about not needing to be governed. Actually, from the Latin, it comes from against the rulers. Archon means rulers, and archy comes from the word archon, which means ruler. So actually, you're against the archons or against the rulers, if you really want to break it down.
No owners, no masters.
Right. My only thing I have to say about all that is most people aren't ready for that. People like you and I, we understand the concept of not wanting to screw everybody. If you're going to have
But that goes into the non-aggression principle, too.
Right. If you want to have a society like that, everyone kind of has to be on the same page, or at least in the same book. Not everyone's going to have the exact same level of awareness and understanding of things. That's not plausible. But for anarchy to work, you kind of need more of like a Star Trek style society where there's resources available to everybody so that there's no need for someone to be a piece of crap criminal.
Right.
Like we were saying earlier about free energy. If free energy was around, well, that just alleviated a huge amount of the problem right there.
Oh, yeah.
Because really the kind of system that would work, if you want to just kind of throw it out there, would be like a benevolent socialism. Socialism in the fact that the technology has progressed to a point that everything is provided for you because it's free. It doesn't cost anything. It's not necessary. And at that point, if you're a criminal, it's because you choose to be, not because you have any needs that aren't being met.
Right. No, I agree. But the problem with the utopian society is that they don't work. So, I mean, but we're at a point now where technology can provide clothing, food, and housing for everyone.
Well, I think you could do it if you do it on, again, this comes down to that local level thing. I think if you started doing these things on a small scale and proving that the model can work, I don't think it could have worked maybe in the 50s or 60s, but in 2016, I'm reasonably confident, and I'm not an engineer, so I could be wrong here, but I'm reasonably confident that if a decent group of human beings with the correct knowledge came together and said, well, here's how you do water purification, here's how you do energy generation, here's how you build homes that are sustainable, like all those sorts of things, I am very confident it could be done with modern technology. And I'm talking about consumer, over-the-counter grade technology, not what, military has access to.
Oh, no. No, everything's there. I mean, you just go on YouTube and research like aquaponics and how to grow food. And you could grow tons of food for people in a very small space. You could, the advent of 3D printing Now that's going to change things.
That technology to me is absolutely amazing and needs to
Yes.
be pushed to its absolute limits.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I've seen things that they've been able to print houses for crying out loud. It's
Yep.
like, yeah, I'm serious. It's like, and that's going to get away from a lot of the consumer debt slavery thing that we're dealing with right now. Is things like that. There's open source technology. There is people out there. There is ways to do that now. Is every society going to be perfect, even coming from an anarchist type? No, there will always be problems, but it is better than what we have right now.
Right.
Period. Hands down.
Well, but the problem is there are people in control of our situations right now, and that's why I always say start on a local level and start working your way up. Because if you have control of your own local society and just keep kind of working your way outwards, the criminality of the powers that be will become more and more obvious as they try and stop you.
Yes.
So if there's all these pockets of resistance, if you will, all over the planet, hopefully, then when these big governments try and come in to stomp out of existence, we would all need to be in communication with each other, saying this is how we're doing it, this is how we're making things work, without the need for these massive institutions of control. That's what we need to work towards, I think. That kind of society. And slowly but surely, unless they, just start doing some really huge, dreadful events on us, that's how I think would be the peaceful way of changing the world for the better for all time.
Yes, I agree 100%. And that is the answer. That is it. I mean, notwithstanding whatever false flag or thing they put out, but in other words, we have to start deprogramming people too, and I think that's what the information truth movement's trying to do to a certain extent.
Yes, that's
they
what
have
the
to get out of
information
it.
war part of this, that's what that is.
Right. So we gotta. I mean, this is why I'm involved in this, and like I want to get more involved, and I want to do more things like this, and have my own pedestal, I guess you could say, to bring awareness like this, because I'm doing it on a real small scale right now, and I want to do more. I want to get involved in this. I have a passion for this, and this is what I want to do with my life, is bring this information. Am I going to be rich off doing it? No, I don't care. I'm not out here for doing this for money.
That's right. Well, you don't get rich doing this. Let's just be honest here. I don't make any money off of this. I'm doing it because I feel it's important that I do it. I like to think that I have a pretty good understanding of how things really are, and I want to just take that research I have done and give it to you. Here, take this information, do with it as you will, but at least I'm going to do my best to present it to you in as professional of a package as I possibly can, so that it's easily accessible to the greatest amount of people.
Yes, exactly. And that's it. It's like in a way you're competing in a way against corporate media. So the more professionally grade, so like the sound that you have is awesome, and the more that progresses, you're going to be competing directly with those people. And so to make like one of the best ones I've seen so far is Tragedy and Hope, Richard Grove's site, where they did like history where it doesn't repeat, and he has it set up just like a newsroom, like you would see on CNN, but he talks about real truth and real history, and it does interviews like a lot of the same people that you have interviewed. So, but the way it's packaged is professional, and it looks. If someone was going to tune into that, it looks like, how am I putting this? You know what I'm getting at here? Like it looks like a CNN studio.
Sure. The whole point is we're competing on their level. The technology for consumers to access studio grade equipment, the cost of that has come down radically, and I can assure you that is true because that's what I'm doing right now. I'm using equipment completely on par with anything you would see in CNN studios. Some of the stuff might actually even be better because I am a recording engineer and I know this technology very well, and I know how to get the most out of what I've got for a minimal cost. And I'm telling you, you can do this if you want your own platform. It can be done for a very reasonable price in this day and age. You don't necessarily need to do what I'm doing, where I'm chasing a vintage sound and going after very peculiar equipment and things like that, because that just happens to be my thing. No, you can do this and get a super clean sound that sounds slick and professional with just a little bit of effort of recording and editing.
Yeah. So,
And Skype is free. Skype is free. Just need a decent internet connection. So
yeah.
I'm telling you, you can do it.
Yeah, we're putting together. Me and my buddy are putting together ideas on how we want to go about this. And I don't know a lot about technological part of it, as far as like microphones and mixers and so I've never done that before, so it's going to be a learning experience, which I'm looking forward to. Because maybe you can off air, you can give me some pointers or send me some links on some good stuff to begin with.
Well, that's what I do for a living. So yes, anyone who wants to know how to do these sorts of things, email me at secretsofsaturn@gmail.com, and I will tell you how to do this on a budget, because this is what I do for a living. I work in the music field.
Thank you. That's awesome. And I think the more people that do stuff like this, the better, the more it will get out there. I mean, even on a small scale, it doesn't matter as long as you're doing something, right?
Right. Well, it's, everyone's got their own flavor. I mean, I'm doing the same thing that, say, Alex Jones is doing with his huge production that he's got. But I've got my own spin on it, my own flavor. I don't come off the same way as he does, and everybody's kind of got their own tastes. So some people may like the bombasticness that Alex Jones delivers. Some other people may like the more laid-back approach that I have. I kind of go for an NPR style, close on the mic, very detailed sound, try and enunciate really well. That's just the way I speak. That's just my personality. So everyone's got their own thing. And I think we would all have an audience. And as long as we're all delivering the truth, whatever bow you put on the package is just fine with me.
Exactly. And as long as you're doing something that is truthful and you believe what you're doing, you have a passion for it, and people will gravitate. If you have passion, people are always gravitate to that.
And passion doesn't have to mean screaming your head off. And I just want to kind of say that I have a very strong passion for what I do. I put a lot of work into the editing and post process. Doing the interviews is the easy part. I put more work into post production than I do into just sitting here and having a chat with somebody I like.
Right. Yes. That is there it is. And see, that is one of the things I got to learn how to do. I can't wait, dude. I'm really excited about it because I live to learn. So I'm looking forward to being able to start my own thing. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and that's a great conversation. And it was we kind of hit all kinds of different things. Did a full spectrum there.
All right, Jonas, this was a really interesting talk, and we hit a lot of topics, and sounds like you definitely know what you're talking about, and you're very passionate and into what it is you're talking about. What is it that you want to get out to everyone? What is it you're working on now, and where do you want to see yourself?
What I'm working on right now is, again, like I mentioned earlier, doing a podcast, YouTube channel and a podcast. Me and a good friend of mine, we want to do what you're doing, make it professional, but we also have a learning curve because we have to learn about the equipment and everything. That is what's in the future for me. Right? I continue to do post continuously on stopthecrime.net. That's Deborah Taveras' webpage. If you want to check out her stuff, it's stopthecrime.net. That's the actual webpage. I admin the Facebook page. And all I want to get out there is the truth and challenge people's paradigm and look at the reality that we live in and not hide from it. And that's about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing your first interview with me, and I think you're going to really make some great noise out there.
All right, man, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And we can do this again.
Yeah, I would love to.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
For his first interview, I'd say Jonas did really well. I really enjoyed speaking with him, and I hope you found it as informative as I did. If you wish to contact this show, we can be reached at secretsofsaturn@gmail.com, or you can go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/secretsofsaturn, the YouTube channel, youtube.com/secretsofsaturn, and we are also an official podcast on iTunes. We'll see you soon.